Yeah, greetings to you all, comrades, and thank you for joining us. This is Conscious in Study Group. We meet every Thursday for the last many years to discuss the philosophy for decolonizing, the philosophy and ideology for decolonization of Africa that Nkrumah presents in his book called Conscious. And we have been reading and meeting to read chapter 3 so far of the book, which is Society and Ideology. So, of course, following our engagement and our discussion last week on the connection between ideological standpoint and history, where we explored how the great historians have been self-appointed public prosecutors, accusing on the behalf of the past, as we read, and admonishing on behalf of the future. Today, we are continuing with our journey to examine the works of various historians. So this week, we are actually learning to this historian called Leopold von Ranke. He's a prominent 19th century German historian, and his ideological approach to history. So our discussion will center on how Ranke's view on state hegemony, the spiritual personality of state, and his individual liberty reshaped historical narrative despite his claim to merely show what really happened. So the text highlighted today is a text that we're going to engage in regards to this today. So welcome all of you, and yes, let's discuss this. There are a lot of things, including how concealed ideology is and all these things that we are intending to do today. So once again, permit me to recognize the presence of all of you, and thank you very much, Brother Usu, for joining us, Gerald Nunaski, Sister John, Brother Coco, Windhoek, and I know many more will be joining us as we move along. Thank you very much, and feel most welcome to our class. So as usual, we request for anybody who is of interest or able to read for us the highlighted paragraph, then we start sharing what do you think in regards to the paragraph. So permit me to request any member who is interested or who is able to please read for us the highlighted paragraph. Hello, anybody who can read for us the paragraph?
You want someone to read from it, do you?
Yeah, I'm requesting Sister John somebody to read for us this paragraph that is highlighted in yellow, but you read it a bit slowly.
Okay.
Don't be fast if you're intending. Please.
Okay, no worries, I'll do it, Brother Pigman. Even Ranke, I don't know if I pronounced his name correctly, even Ranke, the great 19th century German historian who boasted that his aim was not to sit in judgment on the past, but only to show us what really happened, was far from being a mere chronicler of the past. He was, in spite of his claims, an engagé historian. The key to the attitude which he strikes in his historical works lies first in his views on the necessity of strife for progress, and second, in his ideas on the source of the state and the relation of the individual to the state. Dutifully grinding an axe for His Prussian Majesty, on the first point, Ranke holds that it is precisely through one state seeking a hegemony of Europe and thereby provoking rivalry that the civilian of the European state is maintained. The civilization of the European state is maintained. On the second point, he holds that the state, in being an idea of God, enjoys a spiritual personality, and hence that neither reform nor revolution is exportable, for this would do violence to the personality of the importing state. He also holds that it is only through the state to which an individual belongs that he can develop and preserve his fullness of being. and the ideal of liberty, which he is able to propose to Russian subjects, is a spontaneous subjection to the state. Is it surprising that he should have explained Luther's condemnation of the Peasants' War? Ranke, writing history, implements an ideological viewpoint which he at the same time seeks to conceal. I've finished.
Thank you very much, Sister John, for reading for us this paragraph. Permit me to know, first of all, the comrade who has joined us by the name Vivo. Did you change the name? Vivo, kindly unmute yourself and let us know who you are. Vivo? I see your camera is on. Let me check on who you are before we proceed. Is this Elder Sam?
Yes, Brother Pigeon.
Elder Sam.
You can change it to my correct name. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So let me reread again the paragraph that Sister John has read for us as we try to look at this philosopher and engage on what he's saying here so that we can share our thinking on this. And I read slowly again. As also Sister John, you take time also to at least internalize the text that you've read. I know we always send this text in advance, but still sometimes it's important that when you read it again, at least you have another time to engage it. The text says that even Ranke, or Rank, the great 19th-century German historian, who boasted that his aim was not to sit in judgment on the past, but only to show us what really happened, was far from being a mere chronicler of the past. He was, in spite of his claims, an engaged historian. The key to the attitude which he strikes in his historical work lies first in its view of the necessity of strife for progress, and second in his ideas on the source of state and a relation of the individuals to the state. Dutifully, grinding an axe or an axe for His Prussian Majesty, on the first point, Ranke holds that it is precisely through one state seeking hegemony of Europe and thereby provoking a rivalry that the civilization of Europe's state is maintained. On the second point, he holds that the state, in being an idea of God, enjoys a spiritual personality, and hence that neither reform nor revolution is acceptable. For this will do violence to the personality of the importing state. He also holds that it is only through the state to which an individual belongs that he can develop and preserve his fullness of being. And the idea of liberty, which is able to propose to Prussian subjects, is a spontaneous subjection to the state. It is surprising that he should have explained Luther's condemnation of the Peasants' War. Ranke's writing history implements an ideological viewpoint which he at the same time seeks to conceal. And that connects also to what we read in our previous class a bit, for those benefit of some connection to what we are discussing. In the previous paragraph, coming from us says that the connection between an ideological standpoint and the writing of history is a perennial one. A check on the work of great historians, which include the Herodotus and Thucydides, quickly exposes their passionate concern with ideology. Their irresistible moral, political, and sociological comments are particular manifestations of more general ideological standpoints. Practically, the great historians have been self-appointed public prosecutors, accusing on behalf of the past, admonishing on behalf of future. The accusation and admonishing have been set in a rigid framework of presupposition, both about the nature of good man and about the nature of a good society, in such a way that this presupposition serves as the intimation of an implicit ideology. So that's the previous paragraph that then connects to this paragraph. As usual, we first of all ask if there are any words that need definition or any words that need clarification before we allow members to actually start sharing their thoughts. So are there any words that need definition or explanation?
Engagé historian.
Is what? Anybody who can have a definition of the word engaged historian? Anybody who wish to explain that word before we check?
Can I
Brother
try?
Coco?
Yeah,
Yes, Brother Coco. Then Elder Sam.
engage is a French word, and a past tense of engaged. So that's engaged in French. But here it's being used to show that someone is effectively engaged, is part of the project, part of the process. It's not neutral, in short. So engagee is really part and parcel of that process. So active could be another word to say you are actively engaged with the process. Probably would be the easiest way to explain it. Would that be better, Sir Windhoek?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Coco. You've reminded me when I was reading Common Crew or Marcus Garvey work today. Marcus says that whoever is a good leader must read English, but read Latin, because he's saying that most of English words are from Latin, and he also talk about French. Trying to actually identify that word is more French is very important and helpful for us, Brother Coco.
Yes, thank you. So the other two words which I used a lot is committed or involved. Committed or involved.
Oh, okay.
They can be those two synonyms. Okay.
Thank you, Sir Windows. Is there any other word?
Hegemony. Hegemony. Is it? I don't know how to ask. Where does it fall? Does it connote positivity, or does it connote negativity? And what is its definition?
Elder Sam?
Thanks. Hegemony
Sam,
is, yes, hegemony can be explained by saying dominance. Dominance by one state or by a group. And the connotation basically is that you are dominated and you are subjugated. So it has a negative basically in many ways. Because when somebody dominates you, he's totally in control or controls everything that belongs to that group or state. Any other person takes the cue from or take the direction from that hegemony. Thanks.
Thank you,
So-
Elder Sam. Any other words that need maybe the definition? Brother Coco? Go
Just
ahead.
to add what my brother has said, it's in the context of Europe, those countries were vying or fighting to lead Europe, to be the best in Europe, so to dominate Europe. So maybe you understand that in that context, that the European states were amongst themselves fighting for that hegemony or for that dominance of Europe. And to come to the present day, we can talk more about what the US is doing. Look at what the US is doing, then you understand what hegemony is. They want to be the only one leading the world. It used to be a fight between them and the Soviet Union, but Soviet Union collapsed. That changed, and maybe China is rising now, or we can say what we are now is in a multipolar world where we don't have a single powerful force. But I think at the moment the United States still holds that hegemony. I hope that helps.
So,
Thank you, Brother Coco. Yes, Sabina,
so
go ahead.
hegemony is dominance. Is that it?
That is correct. It's a strife for dominance or leadership, especially is used in the context of international relations or geopolitical relations. Okay.
How does hegemony relate to empire, dynasty, etc.?
So as we said, the European countries were all vying for power, vying for dominance amongst each other. We can talk about Prussia at that time, which later became part of Germany. France, we can talk about Britain, and then Italy. There are lots of them, and Spain. So when they were vying for dominance or power within Europe, was how they define Europe as we see it today. So if you wanted to relate that to empire building, they then went out of their spheres of influence in Europe and went to build the colonies. As you know, the empire is made up of different constituent parts with the mother country at the center, and then all the other subordinate bodies sort of stuck to it. So an empire, it becomes greater the more colonies it has, the more land it has, or the more people it has. I hope that helps.
So the mother is at the center and the father is at the periphery.
Sabina.
Yes.
But I hope for the interest of this knowledge, you understand the hegemony. Now, is there any other question? Probably.
Yes, Brother President.
Yes, Elder Sam.
Grinding an axe in the context of what we have read. Thanks. The meaning of grinding an axe.
Anybody who's willing to come in to explain that?
If there's no one, allow me to do that, and at the same time try to share my views if that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Brother Coco. Please start us
Okay.
by sharing explain that and share your views, please.
Okay. Grinding the axe. In this case, Ranke claimed to be a neutral player. he wanted to be seen as someone who is not involved with history, just as a chronicler or as someone who just states facts, historical facts as they were, to say, oh, this is what happened and that's what happened, or that led to X, Y, Z as facts. But what happened is that he was trying to protect the authority of the Prussian state and the hierarchy within that state. So when we say he was grinding the axe for his majesty, it means he was protecting or fighting for the state sovereignty. He was saying whoever wants to challenge the state has to realize that the state is divine. The state comes from God. The state is untouchable. So he in short, he was advocating for the divinity of the state. He wanted the Prussian monarchy to enjoy all the authority that he could, as well as the hierarchy. So whoever harbored any ideas of revolting against this monarchy, then will be influenced by what Ranke was saying. So Ranke is not just someone who is just telling history as it is. He's actually using that to form his own ideological perspective, or to spread his political views in this case, or ideological position. He's not just using history neutrally, he's using history as an axe. And in this case, on behalf of the monarchy in Prussia. I hope that helps, Brother Sam. But there are two main points there which they are saying. The state as a source of individual fulfillment. He is saying individual liberty is inextricably linked with that of the state. It means only will you enjoy liberty if your state is functioning well or is doing really well. So in short, you're not going to touch the sovereignty of the state. You're not supposed to challenge the state or the rulers in your state. And the belief is there that that the rivalry and struggle, they push history forward, of course, but at the same time, we said reform or revolution were not exportable. When we say it's not exportable, we are saying there should not be any external interference into a state. A state had to go by itself to be what it was. It should not be, let's say, influenced by what was happening from other countries. So again, he's talking against revolution. He's talking against reform. He's advocating for a state to grow organically, to grow in a way that is orderly, that follows what those in power, in position of authority or in hierarchy, dictate. All right. So this is someone who you say he is conservative, does not want any change at that time. But at the same time, you can see someone who is an idealist. He is coming from an idealist philosophical point of view, where he thinks the state comes from God. It's a God who has determined that the state has to be like that and should not be changed. So when you take those 2 points, the fact that the individual has to be subservient, subordinate to a state, and the fact that the state is an idea from God, it creates people who are docile, people who are subordinate, who can not challenge the state in any shape or form, because they see the state as God's reflection on earth. So he's taking the religion taking what he knows, or education, let's say that, and the ideology, meshing them with ideology to protect the Prussian monarchy of that time, to let it continue to thrive and survive, regardless of how bad it was doing. But again, before I stand down, let's talk about that in the context of decolonization. In the context of decolonization, Dr. Nkrumah has put that there for us to think about external influence. Let's not forget, he is a man who was strong on Pan-African unity, strong on scientific socialism, Marxist-Leninism, as we call it, and as well as indigenous Africanness, African way of doing things, egalitarianism. So he is trying to remind you that all of those things, they are from within, they are not from outside, but you have let the Europeans come in and dominate you and do things the way they want you to believe them and not question them. Whereas at the same time, look at what they are saying. They are saying within their own state, this should not happen. But you let them do this to you as Africans. So it's sort of a challenge to us as Africans to think carefully about what we stand for. And again, who is telling our stories? Who is telling our history? Is it in our benefit or someone else's benefit? So it's a challenge. The challenge is there. And again, let's look at it from the colonial power in this case. The Europeans will say, this competition is amongst us. We say none of us should challenge each other. But when it comes to the Africans or the colonies, they are part of us. We can do anything that we want on them. So we need to think about that. It's double-edged sword. We as the people who have been colonized, we can use that to fight for our own freedom. But we can also realize that they can use it as a counter-claim, counter-revolutionary tactic to say, you don't have anything. In fact, you don't know anything about God. We taught you about God. We brought God to you. You are part of our states. I hope I have explained as much as I can. But I know most of you will have your own views, which will also help. Okay.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, Elder Sam, please come in.
No, I had asked the question and I think he explained it thoroughly. Thanks.
Are you willing to share your thoughts now, or we give you time? Elder Sam, you
Brother
are muted.
Pigeon,
Yes, Awindok.
grinding an X. Unfortunately, Brother Coco has understood. Grinding an X for His Prussian Majesty. And dutifully so. So Ranke had a duty to grind the eggs for His Majesty. Wherever this duty was derived, whether from civil responsibility or whether he was given this responsibility by His Majesty, that's another point for another case, but dutifully so. So grinding the eggs, to me, the way I understand it is not to make the eggs blunt, but to sharpen the eggs, figuratively so. He would go about grinding these eggs by researching equipping and helping His Majesty in any way possible for His Majesty to consolidate, to reaffirm his position. So he's looking for power, he's looking for ways and means to help His Majesty reach his objectives. Thank you.
And what do you think about that? Is it wrong? Is it right?
I don't see anything wrong with that, because he's doing it out of civil duty or by request from the Majesty.
Now, if you take that in the context of history, let me say now, does it mean that also what you think is that all the writers of history have been writing the history in a process of grinding the eggs to whoever is their majesty? Those we come across, because remember by that time, when we read when Marcus Garvey was very concerned on the writings of the whites. Remember what he said? That they never write for your interest. It means in their writing process, they're writing for their majesty. And what I'm interested is not even the writing for the majesty, it's for what purpose. So as Ranke was grinding the eggs for the majesty, what was the purpose of that egg? What do you think about that, Fawindo?
Yes, whatever, to me, the purpose does not matter. Whatever the purpose was, that was the purpose of the day, and that was for the extension of their power and hegemony all over. So do your do. They have been doing their do's. So whether the axe was being sharpened to chop off the head of an African, or whether it was used for whatever purpose, that's what they wanted. And that's how they have written it. Have your own wants and have your own writings. And counter the start making that axe blunt now, because it's already sharpened, so that your head cannot be chopped off. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's Sister Tapua. I know you are not, you said you are not in a position to speak, but once you are able, let me know. Sister, welcome. I know you've come a bit late together with Sister Grace. Sister John, probably is your earliest time in our class, but are you able to share with us, if you're able, what do you think about this Ranke thing? And if you're not able, or you need some time a bit, we can also allow you some time. Sister John?
Yes, thank you. I'm absorbing at the moment, so I'm unable to comment, but I'm listening and learning. Because it's complicated, it's so deeply complicated. And that's all I can say right now, but thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sister John. Elder Sam, are you able to share your thoughts? Elder?
Yes, brother Pigeon and members on the platform. I think here Kwame Nkrumah is still continuing to show us the effect of ideology in terms of the relationship of the intellectuals of those days. You know, we've read about the historians, the fathers of history before Herodotus and Thucydides, that came as the fathers of history. But always what Kwame Nkrumah is trying to show us is that in every epoch, in any time, given time, these intellectuals come up with theories that are a subject that must lead humanity and society in a given direction. But we should not forget that even if they try to show us things scientifically, they will always revolve and revolve around saving the ruling class of that given time. So every time, and we must be careful. This is where Nkrumah is trying to show. We must be careful that we should not be cheated, because some of them, they will hiddenly try to hide that they are siding or they are saving the ruling class or the ruling clique of that time. So in this case, Ranke is also trying, but if you go further in the paragraph, you will see that even himself, he was exposed later, and people started criticizing that he is also preaching Lutheranism, and that the basics was that the German leadership at that time was the intention of God that things should be in that way in society. But we know that Luther himself at one stage changed and turned against Catholicism and said, brought reformism. But even when the peasants revolted against this, following his reformist activities, when they started really pushing and making war, Luther himself turned against the peasants and sided with the ruling clique. So I think this is where Nkrumah is trying to caution us that yes, they are intellectuals, they are people who will lead society, but from time to time we must be careful. They represent actually the ruling clique, or they will try to push society towards the ruling clique. But the emphasis is that every theory, every ideology will serve the ruling clique of that time. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Elder Sam, for that. It's a very interesting element you're bringing here, and also helping us to explain further on the Lutheranism element that's just mentioned, and also trying to link to the previous historian. So thank you very much, Elder Sam, for that. Brother Usu?
Brother Begin. Oh, sorry.
Yes, Hawindok?
Can I comment?
Yeah, please go ahead, Hawindok.
On the second points, he holds that the state, in being an idea of God, enjoys a spiritual personality, and hence that neither reform nor revolution is exportable. To where is it not exportable? I don't understand. I don't understand what is meant there.
Okay.
I would have wanted to see it in the context of the Arab upspring, where my idea is the revolution started somewhere with Ben Ali, and then it got exported to other countries in that region. Is it the same? Should I have my understanding in that way, or
Okay.
how is it not
And you
in key?
Okay. Anybody who might be willing to help by sharing their thoughts on that line that Windhoek is requesting, or is trying to think along? Anybody who want to elaborate more on that?
But my
Hello?
thinking is also
Yes.
when the revolution starts
Yes,
when the revolution starts in Kenya by the Gen Zs, then the Gen Zs in Uganda and the Gen Zs in Tanzania, they emulate. So is that not the exportability of revolution?
Now, Sawindok, if I take you back a bit, I'll allow anybody who wants to explain this to come. But Sawindok, take a step back a bit. Elder Sam, I'll allow you to come in on this. If you take a step back a bit before that statement, look at where he's trying to base his argument on the state: personality, spirituality, and God. But yes, Elder Sam, please come in.
Brother Pigeon and members on the platform, I think the thing that we must not lose track is that in this philosophy, and this we can trace it from the times of the Plutos, there's always this element that for which class do these intellectuals stand for? And the issue is the divide that we always say, is it spirituality or what we call, what I want to say, but materialism. Against, yes. So
Idealism.
If idealism and materialism. So we must also not forget these two duality, that in this ideology, there's always the side of idealism and materialism. And these philosophers that we are talking about, most of them were falling in the side of idealism. And their essence is that everything that is coming to be, it is made of God. And if it is made of God, it should not be touched by anybody. Nobody must change it. That's why they say now, they were saying revolution and reform cannot be transportable or transferable. The essence is that it is God, it is salient, nobody must cross the line the other side. If you go the other side, you are a sinner and you must be punished. This is how they were trying to stifle materialism. Will tell us that society cannot be stagnant. Society is development, and in society there will continuously be contradiction for the state to develop or the society to develop and change into another direction. So the essence of this issue is that they wanted to keep society stagnant, believing that if you do this, you are against God, and therefore it cannot happen. And therefore, in that way, they were emphasizing that revolution or reform cannot be transported, because then you are pushing for violence. And this is what happened with Luther. Luther was, with the reforms that he came with, showing the peasants that this is the way to go. But when the peasants took this to a higher height of revolution, then Luther turned against the peasants and denounced them. This is my input. Thanks.
Thank you. Sawindok, is that helpful?
Yeah, it's helpful. I'll regurgitate and come back.
Yeah. Now, yes, Sawindok, just to come on that a bit. The fact that Ranke says that revolution or reform is not exportable is just to defend what he wants. The fact that he puts God's personality or bring God in a state is basically the idealist mentality of Elder Sam is saying. But then how do you want to revolt against God? How do you want to reform God? And how do you want to reform what God has created or revolt against what God has created? Basically, you produce subjects who become obedient, and you discourage them to challenge a system or never even to try to do the same elsewhere. And you claim that if they try to do that anywhere, it's like you are doing violence to the personality of the imported state. So just warning you of the danger of trying to reform or revolt against what they view is godly. And what they view is godly is a state. And that's why previously in our reading, there's at a point when Nkrumah recommended that a state must be secular. And I think he was very right to bring the element of a state being secular, having analyzed the behavior or the tendency of these idealists trying to make states be more idealist or being a religious state or which state as such. Because then in a society where you have different groups of personalities, how do you want to subject them to that your God spirituality on the term and make that state be so? So that's what I want to add on this. But allow me to ask Brother Usu also to come in and share his thoughts on the text. That's okay. Brother Usu? But you can come in anytime, Kawindok. Brother Usu, please go ahead.
Thank you.
And I hope the sisters, I've been giving the sisters some time to leave because Ida came late and Chisomo, but I'm giving them some time to leave. So I'll come back to them.
Thank you, convener. When I look at this paragraph, well, it's just showing the very character of the kind of people that unfortunately have come to dominate Africans from centuries ago. And if we can look at what has happened in Africa to date, even how they are playing out each day, left and right, forth and back, and looking at how this historian has been described, Ranke, in a sense that even the honest ones among them cannot be trusted. And for me, it is not a matter of trying to understand the word history in its standing, and also being a tool that can be a tool or record that can be manipulated. What you see, when I read text like this, it makes me become broad, and the questions I ask most of the time is why it happened to us, and it is still happening that in Africa we trust these people, even though they don't trust themselves, but we trust them. And it is, of course, happening that way because nobody has written apart from a few. And would we believe that Nkrumah books are not common to come across anywhere? Sheikh Anta Diop mentioned all the other great, I mean, those that we feel like right in bias of Africa, trying to be African. See, we find that their materials are not common. They are not found in our schools. What books do our children read? What kind of history are they taught? And I remember when we were reading a lot of Roman, Greek history, then you come to the Bible, the Old Testament, or coming with the so-called Jewish history, with some Palestine. You see, all these things, which of them speak about Africa. And I remember a day that I asked one Anglican priest from Nigeria, and I said that, Canon, so tell me, if I make you a minister of agriculture in Nigeria, are you going to be successful? Then he asked me why. I said, you know much about that Palestine, but how much do you know about even your own country, Nigeria? You know all the genealogy of whether it is true or not, the fathers of Abraham and the rest. But if I ask you, even your own ethnicity and the clan you come from, give me the genealogy, will you be able to tell me? He looked at my face, then he started laughing. Of course, it means that no. You see, and why? The point is, even nobody has written. So where is he going to get that information to read? And of course, naturally, whatever comes to us is what we welcome, whether it belongs to us or not. It is later that we will discover that something has gone wrong, and it comes from whatever we took in. You see, so it is even better if we write and write biasly, or write in a way that somehow it will provoke people to think. And even if something goes wrong, I mean, others would seek to correct it. It is better to write bad than not to write at all. Because then, if we don't write and only expose ourselves to be fed by what even we don't know, certainly, I think Africa becomes a good example of how such kind of living and existence can turn people to become. You see, this afternoon, was it? No, yes, 3 days ago, we posted some adverts. And there's somebody, whether it's in Pakistan or Afghanistan or wherever, commented on it that you Africans, like, we have to become like them because they've got the book and they've got one God. And we are just joking. It is now that we are trying to. Well, he was talking nonsense, but there's certain truth in it. And that truth is that, is it now that we want to write? It's not late, but then he sort of awakened me to the fact that it is needful now to write. Because whatever we are talking now, as I listen to the beginning, the discussion and the various contributions, it comes to dwell on what should we do? We must write. Because if we don't write, then we are going to be in trouble whereby people even will write and write against us. And we may not know, because most times also, even the language of writing is not our mother tongue. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Brother Ben. Thank you very much. Of course, I know the elite or the professionals within the continent have been affected a bit. I think some of the even writings might be sentence expressive, I know. And you realize some organization came in to fund what and what. And then when they come in to fund whatever, they must also be pushing some of what you write to be of their interest. And this also affects a lot sometimes in what is the end product. But again, we also suffering what Nkrumah is saying, that our majority of elites, those who might be writing, are actually were exposed to the so-called colonial education that Nkrumah was describing in the introduction. And then they came out of the education school or the education institution, not as radical or progressive, but as conservative and liberal. And it's what Brother Cook, I think, pointed out of what Ranke, who Ranke was. And Brother Cook also reminded us, and I think he was reading the book Class 5 of Brother Cook, where Nkrumah also talks a bit on elitism and how that affects a lot. Because those who should be writing, Elder Boni, or what you're saying, are not, as much as they're black, are not going to write about us. Because they don't know about us. They became who they are, or professors of who they are, by what a white man taught them. And that's why also Gavi says that read, because the strongest person in the world is he who undergoes self-education outside the university. But those who go through the process, it's like a process of passing over by brainwashing them. So when they come out of that institution, we have so many professors in the continent, so many of them, professors, so many of them. But if you expect them to be radical or progressive enough to write or do their material in the interest of ourselves, then you are lying to yourself. Because majority of them, and you see few of them, like, for example, the writers like Cheikh Anta Diop, Wallace Inca, Professor Mbodwa Diongo, are just a few of elites that became progressive out of the process and still were able to write. The likes of Nkrumah and so many other presidents who went through the process, there were still few. So I think the honor is on the few who are progressing to do the right thing, because the majority may not do the right thing. And if they end up writing, they might not even write something for it. But also, I know you want to come back. Please come back as I move to the sisters.
Yes, it's a question I want to ask based on what you are. Is there a way that we can say that this is African writing in its genre? You see, women and women, we differ even when we write in terms of writing in being a man writing. It goes opposite to the way a woman writes. If we write essay, the beginning of a woman's essay, the same thing will differ from how the man. Normally, you find that women would not come with a good beginning that will please the man. That is how men would describe it, that is not pleasing. And then men too will start in it. So if this difference exists, can we have a writing style which could be African? And what would that be? That is the question I want to ask, please.
Thank you very much, Brother. But I think the biggest thing is not even the style. We're going deeper to the ideological point. Could we have a writing of a common ideological point rather than even the semantics of the presentation? Because the biggest problem, as what you learned in the previous paragraph, Nkrumah said, is that there's been a connection between ideological points and history. So could we have a writing that actually brings the African ideological point? And the question will be, what is that African ideological point? Elder Sam, you want to come in? I want to move to Sister Ida, and then after you come in. Sister Ida, please prepare.
Yes, brother Pigeon, I just wanted to caution us. I think brother Usu must be careful to say there will be a difference between the writing of a man and a woman. I think for me, this is too risky. I think we rather say it depends from the background of a person. From which foundation are you basing yourself? The difference cannot be because he's a woman or she's a lady. The issue would be, what things does the person focus on? Which things does he or she emphasizes? And this will always stem from the basis of the background that person comes from. If they are educated from a European perspective, they will always push things from a European perspective. If they are grounded in the African culture, you will see. And that's why you can see Chenyo Achebe when he writes, if you can see Wole Soyinke when they write, they are profoundly based everything from African culture and African tradition. There's no mistake about it. And this, I think my warning is that we should not try to divide ourselves into saying the perspective will be because she's a woman or because it's a man. The emphasis will differ because people emphasize different things and approach things from different perspectives. Thanks.
Thank you, Elder Sam, and I think you're right. As we go, Sister Ida, please come in as the sister. But I think Brother Usu was saying the writing style rather than even the message. As I've said, the key thing is ideological standpoint. If you share common ideological standpoint, which both men and women have proven they can share, both men and women have proven they can be same leaders irrespective of the gender. The issue is only the writing rather than the message. But Sister Ida, please come in.
I'm afraid I haven't really got much to say because I'm a bit busy and almost en route home. But I like what Brother Sam just shared with us about. I don't think that there can be that much difference apart from, no, I really don't think there's any difference. Men maybe are more used to saying things in a certain form. And but I'm so glad that Brother Sam actually brought that point out. So I'll leave it at that and say thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Sister Grace, please share with us your thinking on the paragraph. And Sister John will come back to you after Grace, if that's okay with you. Sister Grace?
I'm also on the road. Didn't quite, I wasn't here when it was read, but I'm just listening to people's comments. So I can only comment on the writing things. We've discussed this a number of times. There was a comment that somebody knew more about Palestina than Nigeria. And the explanation that how do people know when there's nothing to reference with or to read from? And I find that to be true. We don't write much, and those who write don't write much about our country, our countries, or the continent itself. Even when you're in today's world, even if you want to research through ChatGPT or AI or whatever, the material is very, very sketchy. It's very sketchy because there's not much out there about stuff about ourselves. And sometimes it will even dispute your suggestion because you're trying to tell it that it does exist. And if they don't approve, let's say they don't approve that state, or maybe they don't recognize that leader, it just goes by what they say, not what we say. Even when we're doing research, if you quote our people, they don't like it because they don't think they are credible enough to go into your research papers. So it goes on and on and on. So like we've been saying, let's write and write and write, whatever, how doesn't matter how little, and publish these things so it's on the internet and people can find it. That's my 1 pence contribution to the conversation.
Thank you, Sister Grace. Thank you very much. Sister Takwa, I see now your hand is up.
Hello, everyone. I've been listening in, and I'd like to make a few suggestions on my understanding of the paragraph. I'm looking at the topic sentence here. Even Ranke, right, the German historian, boasted that his aim was not to sit in judgment on the past. But what is then explained about what he does, because he is an engagé historian, tells us that, brings into question whether it's possible to be neutral when you're writing anything. It's not, which is why our writing does not exist, even if some people write, is not easily acceptable because there's already judgment on it. Because they know the point of view that we're going to write on is the point of view that they've been suppressing forever. I'm looking at I think it's the third or fourth sentence, which says the key to the attitude which he strikes in his historical works lies first in his view on the necessity of strife for progress. And I'm asking myself, is this part of what has contributed to democracy? Because in the element of democracy and the process of election and trying to choose one over the other, there is an element of strife. But this element of strife is supposed to lead to progress. I like the juxtaposition between that sentence, the phrase, his historical works lies first in his view on the necessity of strife for progress. if you follow that idea of his first position and strive for progress, you are then led to this section in the following sentence, which says, on the first point, that is strife, we're given an example. Ranke holds that it is precisely through one state seeking hegemony of Europe and therefore provoking rivalry that the civilization of the European state is maintained. In other words, he's saying, just to be able to maintain the level of civilization that Europe is enjoying or has been enjoying, there should be an element of rivalry and an element of strife. What this points out to me is, and explains the acceptance that the rest of Europe has when it comes to strife within their own countries and when it comes to rivalry within their own countries, which we as Africans find rather difficult. Because in our states, when we have rivals and we have strife, we see it as a negative thing. Even the method of policing that we engage is to suppress. Whereas in Europe, if there is strife, they'd rather encourage the strife to come out. They'd rather encourage the rivalry to come out because they acknowledge that this is how we get progress. You get to understand what people are thinking, even if it is opposite of what you're thinking, by letting them speak. Whereas in our post-colonial states, we have this tendency to suppress strife, to suppress rivalry. Because as far as we are concerned, it does not lead to progress. It actually shows off the problems of leadership. Whereas Europe will accept and say, this is where the ruling party then gets the ideas that the opposition wanted to effect, and they put it into practice and they progress. So for me, what Nkrumah is illustrating here through this intellectual is the acceptance that could arise out of seeing different points of view. On his second idea, the passage says, second in his ideas on the source of the state and the relationship of the individual to the state. What he has done there is he has separated in other words, the strife and rivalry does not threaten the state. The state almost has a spiritual existence, because with the way they have structured the state, the different bodies in the state, it's difficult to undo the American Constitution and start again. What we do at the bottom is get Trump, get Obama, get anyone else at that level. In other words, it's difficult to change the state as it is, which is why, as Africans, if we are going to strive for the unity of Africa, and if we are going to strive for Pan-Africanism, we cannot and we dare not do it within the structures that have been provided for us. Because these structures that have been provided for us are meant to survive in perpetuity. We cannot change them. We are not able to change them. This is why we say democracy does not work for us. Therefore, we need to come up with an African solution to African problems outside the context of what we have, what we've been given, what we've inherited. This brings me to the last, I think the second last sentence, which says, is it surprising that he should have explained, in quotation marks, Luther's condemnation of the peasant war? is it not surprising that one, any of our writings or our ideas, even on Facebook and all these social platforms, are never given the light of day? The last sentence is, Ranke, writing history, implements an ideological point of view which he at the same time seeks to conceal. That's exactly what's happening to us. Europe and politicians in Europe who are trying to preserve their own position are not worried about the strife that we have in Africa or the rivalry. Because the moment we have Traore, the moment we have, who was this guy that had people sitting on his neck? And we have the Black Matters movement. It tells them what they need to do next because they are very sure
George
we will
Floyd.
change the state. Yes, George Floyd. We will not change the state. That will not shake them. They actually want us to go on strike. They actually want the young Kenyans to go on strike. They actually want the young Kenyans to present their government with conflict because then it actually tells them exactly where we are and it gives them the opportunity to plot and to make sure that their state maintains a spiritual existence. So as far as I'm concerned, what Nkrumah is saying here is we cannot achieve the unity and the development and unity of Africa in this context with writings, whether they be our writings or European writings, because we are intellectuals. We've been brought up in this system. We've actually been specially selected by the powers that be that we qualify. Our work is published depending on how much we abide by their rules. I was watching a documentary the other day on the first president of Namibia, that he was only standard 6. And he was the most reasonable person who came up with the most reasonable approach, never overborrowed, never overspent. I know there are no perfect states, but this is what we need to look at. Sorry, I've got to stop. Thank you.
Mr. Sapua, I could have wished you continue talking and talking and talking. Because you have brought another perspective that wasn't coming out clearly all along, but it's also very interesting. Because in one way, you have examined the text in a level of pointing the silent things that I think I agree with majority of members on what you're saying. So thank you very much for that. But I see Brother Coco's hand is up. Brother Coco?
Yes, thank you. Thank you to all of you who have contributed. But I think I still want to go back to Sir Welcome's question. I think he asked about the Arab Spring. But I think that Demetau answered him correctly to say, yes, what you saw happening in the Arab Spring, it can happen. It can happen anyway. Revolutions can happen across the country. Revolutions are infectious, or even reforms. They are exportable. But this is the viewpoint which was being, fronted by Ranke here. And I was reading The Guardian not long ago, which had published an article by Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o. And in it, I'll read something very short, and then I'll go back to the text which we've been reading today. It says, education, on the other hand, is a mode of conditioning people to make them into and function in a given society. It may involve transference of knowledge, but it is conditioned knowledge, branded by the world outlook of the educator and the education system. So having read that, I'll come back to what we're talking here about Ranke here, because here what Ranke is doing, he's using education as an instrument of state power. In effect, what he's doing, he is influencing educated people into believing 3 points, right? 1, that the state is sacred and must not be challenged. 2, reform or revolution is harmful. And number 3 is subjection to authority is a true liberty. It's true liberty. So as you can see, this is an ideological education which is designed not to liberate the minds, but more to align them with their Prussian interests. So you can call that conditioning. He is using history in this case to condition whoever it is that listens to him as an influential intellectual at that time in Prussia. He is influencing people to follow him. And you are right, say, welcome to us and say, does it make sense? Am I losing my mind? Didn't that happen in the Arab Spring? Yes, it did happen. But what Ranke was doing here, he was wielding the axe to protect the Prussian monarchy. This is what he was doing. So my point here is that Dr. Nkrumah is saying, don't just look at those guys and think they know everything, or think that they are neutral, as someone has said before, or think that they are fair, they are unbiased. There is always a bias. And all that bias comes from the education you have given, the conditioning you've been given. And I think what I also mentioned, Chinua Achebe, I mentioned many others. Chinua Achebe, at some point, they had disagreements with Ngugi wa Thiong'o, because Ngugi wa Thiong'o was saying, why are you all guys always using European languages? Who has made European languages unchallenged when it comes to talking about African stuff? But Ngugi came back and said, no, we can use the African languages, European languages, we can use English to explain what we feel as Africans. So there could be at times differences in opinions, but it's important for people to tell their own stories, because not everything which you are told is as it is. It's always tinged with some level of influence coming from that country or whichever country is producing that education. Let's not forget some paragraphs before this, we're talking about coercive action for cohesion. All right, coercive for cohesion. That's what Nkrumah was teaching. That is what we should be pursuing as Africans. Find ways in which, in this case, ideology is there to build the state. And what Ranke is doing here is doing it to defend his own state. He's doing it to defend his own authority, the authority of His Majesty. He's doing faithfully. When we say dutifully, say welcome, we mean faithfully, regardless. He is faithfully defending the hierarchy which existed in Prussia at the time to defend the power that His Majesty enjoyed. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Brother Coco, I think thank you very much again, because you are also raising something I'm also looking at. I think through sharing this, you are able to look at things differently.
Are we still there?
I see what sister. Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
we
Can you
can.
hear me? Yeah, I'm seeing when Sister Tapua pointed the first view of Ranke that. No, I'm speaking. You can't hear me?
I can hear you, comrade.
We can hear you.
We
Brother
can
Biddy.
hear you.
Okay, I think Brother Coco will have to work on his audio a bit. But what I was saying, Brother Coco is raising an element that when
we can hear you
Ranke
now.
said
Thank
what
you.
Sister Tapua said, yeah, when Ranke said what Sister Tapua said in his first opinion, that necessity of strive for progress, the Ranke goes ahead to go against revolution or reform. Let's look at those two opinions. strife might not necessarily mean sometimes physical bloodshed and whatever. Same should also the revolution mean. Of course, Malcolm X says there's never been a bloodless revolution. But what is the difference between that strife and revolutionary reform? And if you believe that strife is a necessity for progress, then why don't he think also revolutionary reform is a necessity of the same progress? And I think that points to what Brother Coco is saying, that this person just wanted to discourage people. And that's why it's so contradicted in his standing point for so many things. And that's what even Nkrumah started by saying, the contradiction in him of what is bringing the first place, that he doesn't want to fit in judgment. And remember what Nkrumah said in the previous paragraph, that these historians became the judge and the prosecutor. They decided to do anything to their past and the future. But here is bringing some contradiction that I'm also just getting at. Brother Coco had just shared his thought on this. But let me allow Sister John to share her thoughts. She's the only person who hasn't shared her thought. Alongside, Gerald Ranke is around. Yeah, Gerald Ranke is around. So let's go to Sister John. John, I know it's more of first or second time, but feel free to either share your thoughts or even give your general comments to this. We may not subject you too much to having a mouth to share your thoughts, but please share with us what you think, Sister John. Hello, Sister? Sister John?
I think she said earlier she was listening.
Okay. Gerald Ranke, you're the last person standing who hasn't spoken. So please, can you speak? General? Okay. Then I'll speak a bit on what I think as well. But feel free, Sister John, to come in, or General Ranke to come in anytime you wish. But let me share my thoughts a bit as we build up this conversation. We are geared towards the end of our session, maybe in the next 25 minutes. Now, Ranke is a very important element here. But I will first of all judge him as an idealist in the first place. But as I move along, is also the contradiction that is saying he never boasted to judge, to sit in judgment on the past. And where is the past coming here? By him trying to claim in his history that the government or the state is a God creation or whatever, that's already a judgment of the past to me. So he's trying to judge the past by coming to defend that the government or the state is a God creation. But he's trying to say in that sentence, first sentence, that he never wanted to sit on judgment of the past, but only to show us what really happened. So do Ranke believe that his opinion on the state and God thing is what really happened? And I'm finding that is totally not true. Now, the element that is engaged historian, Brother Coco said that is somebody involved or committed to history. But again, I don't think that as much as you can be a very devoted historian, can still take away your biasness in history. You can still do what you want, as much as even you're involved. And most of the time, those who actually commit biasness are those who are too informed. Not even people who are not informed. People who are too informed of the reality of the situation are people who decide to do an outright biasness in their writing. But again, in my next comment is that the sentence I said that the key to the attitude which he strikes in his historical work lies in the view, of course, necessity of strive for progress. And I believe, and I support also what Sister Sapua said. Indeed, sometimes back we had this conversation. And when we had the conversation, I remember Brother Connie was the chair on the element of strife, and Brother Elder Glenn had an issue with strife. But is it true that strife is a necessity for progress? On our historical advancement as a continent, is it true? And Elder Sam is here maybe to tell us. Elder Sam, is it true that strife is a necessity for progress? From your point of view, Elder. Elder Sam?
Brother Pigeon and members on the platform. It depends. It depends how we define strife. And if we describe strife as bitter disagreement, if we describe it as conflict, it is. Everything develops because there's a sharp contradiction. And that contradiction, we may call it strife, or we may call it bitter disagreement, or we may call it conflict. That's how society develops. I think the matter here is, do we lose total control? Does this strife lose total control? Is it something that is measurable, that can smoothly make a transition? Because that is the difference of saying reform and transform and revolution. In revolution, you will always find violence, uprising or upheaval. But strife, it is the same system that we call contradiction or movement of opposites. And I want to draw members to the situation. Yeah, I just want to end up by saying I want to draw the members' attention to the fact that Martin Luther was excommunicated by the state proves exactly this. There was a strife because he came with the reform of Catholicism, and when this contradiction became sharp, in order to suppress this revolution, Martin Luther had to be ostracized or excommunicated, and that's why he died almost in sort of exile, where he was translating the Bible into German. The fact for me is that strife is a contradiction between two elements, and the measure is what we must guard against. Is it total strife where it's out of control, or it's a change that happens under control situation? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, because I think basically another word
Brother
will be
Pigeon.
dialect. Another word will be wait. I'm coming to you, Brother Window. But Elder Sam, basically we can view strife as dialectic.
That's my understanding.
Thank you, Elder Sawindo.
Yeah, that is just exactly what I wanted to fill up on Elder Zem, that strife in this case, what is meant by strife in this case is, in my opinion, would be dialectics. Thank you.
And thank you. Now, if dialectics, and we all agree actually that dialectics is necessity for progress, but why is it that in our modern state, people want to attain one, people don't want this strife? Like, look at what governments are doing in South Africa, Grand National Unity Government, in Kenya, broad-based government, where people want to run a state in a place that everybody agree on one direction. So there's no opposition. And when people see that opposition join hands with government, then people think that's progress. That now they're working together. Well, actually, it underpins a very important element. Sister Tapua, please come in.
Thank you very much. Maybe I'll start by responding to the question that you've brought in on why in our context we don't quite understand the role of opposition, because we think opposition means you're out of the system and you are against the general progress of the whole. Whereas in the European context, government cannot exist without opposition, because opposition is there to keep reminding the government that there's another side to this coin. I put my hand up because I wanted to respond to the question on revolution. I think part of the statement reads, and hence that neither reform nor revolution is exportable. When I read this, I asked myself what a revolution is. And if I'm correct to say that a revolution is a total change, a takeover, a total takeover, then can a revolution be exported? Because if you're waging a revolution in Kenya, you're responding to the Kenyan government and what it has in place. Can we export that same revolution to Zimbabwe? No, we can't. This is why I think the Nkrumah then says, what's his name? Ranke says, for this would do violence to the personality of the importing state. In other words, revolutions cannot be imported. I think the typical example that I saw during the Arab Spring. Hello? Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I wanted to come in, but just finish.
Okay. I wanted to give an example of where I saw the importation of revolution go wrong, and it was in Syria. Because the Arab Spring had just sprung from one place to the other. But the circumstance that the Syrians were facing were slightly different from the rest of the Arab world. And therefore, when they wanted to jump onto the bandwagon, what they were trying to import was something that didn't quite fit into their circumstances. Yes, it can influence, but you cannot import. Yes, you can be driven to relook at your own system so that you conduct a revolution against the system that you have. This is why, for example, when we're thinking of Pan-Africanism and we're thinking of how we can wage a revolution within the context of Africa, it needs us to have a common perception of what it is that we are changing, which is common to everyone, which is why it's important for us to understand who we're revolting against. We're not revolting against the Zimbabwean government or the South African government. We're revolting against imperialism. And once, as Africans, if we understand who it is or what it is that we're trying to attain, then we will be able to export this revolution, because we've got the same within countries. And we're saying we don't want to acknowledge these boundaries. And therefore, what we're looking for is a common cause that can unite us and we can wage a revolution. This is why the Sahel, for example, was able to quickly gel together, because they had a common enemy, France, and they needed to make sure that France would not continue to behave the way it was behaving. This is why it's difficult to export the revolution in the Sahel to other parts of Africa, because we've got to find a way of uniting ourselves and come up with a common cause. I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Tapua. You pointed me back to what Nkrumah talked about revolution. And in the previous readings we have done, and he said that revolution has two aspects. Revolution is a revolution against an old order, and it is also a contest for a new order. Now, old order might not be the same as we are saying across. And it says that, and I think that's very important, that a revolutionary ideology is not merely negative. And that's what people always connote to revolution. They find it negative, which is not merely negative. It is not a mere conceptual refutation of a dying social order, but a positive, creative theory, the guiding light of an emerging social order. Very important element that Nkrumah raised there. But yes, going back to what I was sharing and what you have also raised, it's very important that at this particular context, we are talking about what you're saying in the revolution, as you said it, that exporting the revolution and the reform. But permit me to continue and finish part of what my thinking was, and thank you for coming in. I know we are having 12 minutes to go. I'll finish in 2 minutes. So I was looking at the element of necessity of strife for progress, and you raised the element of opposition, and how do you understand it? But I think even at our own personal capacity, sometimes when you have people think oppositely, then you can progress, but when you think the same way, you might not know much of the progress. And then the idea, second thing is that he thinks that the second is his idea on the source of state and the relation of the individual to the state. The first element I want to pick is the source of state. And do we really know as Pan-Africans what is the source of state? Because to him, he says later on to believe that the state is from where? Is a God thing. What is the source of state? Before we even talk of how do we as individuals relate to the state, what do we understand as the source of state? I'll just take maybe a quick answer, one or two. Apart from what Ranke says here, what do you as an individual think is the source of state? Anybody who can try to share just their thoughts? Okay. So let me believe that.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah. Chairman, one thing I wanted to just add a bit to what Coco talked about earlier, and then I will link it to one factor. I hope I don't forget. You see, Nkrumah work, from what we are reading, coming back to the level of his work. In fact, we are enjoying it because we've trained ourselves to enjoy that type of writing. But what affected Nkrumah in Ghana back home, the land of his own, was that he was misunderstood. In fact, I became Nkrumahist when I left Ghana and I was outside and I saw how much people understand Nkrumah. Then I say, how? You see, then later on, I have to read a lot. Of course, I mean, UKZN library, Nkrumah books can cover one shelf. So I took time to read most of his books. And that is where actually my love for Nkrumah, and then I began to see the kind of light this man, and I asked myself, why back home Nkrumah wasn't that popular? But then the point is, the writings Nkrumah did wouldn't have been understood by the ground people. You see, Ghanaians are educated, but not many people are educated to the level of being able to digest the kind of writing Nkrumah did. And those also who could understood Nkrumah have been bought by the West to actually destroy things, even though they know that the man's work would save Ghana and Africa. But then they are also under the spell of the West just to destroy Nkrumah. You see, so here it comes to the factor of writing. You see, I know that, yes, Nkrumah deliberately wrote to appeal to a level, the class of people he wanted to deal with, so that he can get them and then be able to get what his vision actually out there. But then the bottom people also couldn't understand this man and what he stands for. And so at the point in Ghana, I remember the churches coming out to say that Nkrumah is like a beast. He's a satanist and all these things. In fact, you see, these are people who preach from pulpits. and they preach the ordinary way. They talk in the style that appeal to people. And they were able to convince the ground people that this man is not the man for us. So here it comes to, even if we take bias, of course, you need to be biased, because then the bias spells your target audience, those that you particularly want to reach for a particular purpose. So that one naturally will make you biased. But at the end, I feel like if Nkrumah could have also written certain small books, even for primary schools, but then it also becomes another issue that some of us would want to say that, okay, Nkrumah wrote at this level, but then can we break it down to a level that we can even teach his ideology at the primary level, for a child to begin to understand and not just see Nkrumah, but see a vision for a country and a vision for a continent. There was one example I wanted to remember, but okay, let me just leave it that way. So at the end of the day, what do we want to achieve? Whether we write or we don't write, it is to carry people forward with what we believe in, and we write also from what we believe in. And in that case, what we believe in may be understood at a particular level that we mostly relate to. And we need others who can actually break down our level of communication. In that case, can we be understood by all? Remains something that also we need to answer. And that is where the issue of even how we write becomes important. And me having been into this, let's say that, let me use that example, the Christian ministry. You see, people will follow a pastor, not because the pastor know anything, but the way they communicate at a certain level, for the ordinary man to understand whether it is rubbish or not, makes sense, makes them become popular. That they become more, appealing to people than even to the head of state of a country. You see, so even if we can also take this into the way we write, there's one man who has actually compiled these African kings. So say 100 great African kings. What is his name? Is it Home or Pushkome? Yes. And what? Yes. Time.
Our time is almost up. Just finish.
Yeah, let me just end. Kome has taken his time to take all the history books and has reduced it to the level for school children. You see, I think in much as we talk whether it is history, children need to understand history, because then starting history from that level becomes important. And for me, I still also will say that the style we write, the way we come about some of these things is very important if we want to convince, we actually want to achieve something for our society through the works that we put across, especially today's world that we are in. Even though many people are not reading, they prefer to watch videos.
Okay, thank you. I think what you are raising was also previously raised by Window. We had prepared to start a class on what do we call it? I think there are concepts of consciousness, and we had actually identified all the terms used in consciousness, because this is a philosophical book. It's very hard. Some of us even find very hard to contribute to their thoughts. But yes, I think there's a need for us to synthesize it. Brother Coco, come in, please.
Yeah, I'm conscious of time, but I wanted to say to my brother from Ghana, remember what happened when Nkrumah was toppled? His books were taken away, banned, so no one could get access to them. There are some of his books which are easy to digest, but they are still not taught in Ghana. One of those books is The Class Struggle in Africa. What you're talking about here is mostly what he has covered in The Class Struggle in Africa. So as far as I'm concerned, those who hold power right now are those who have been educated in the West, in the Western school of thought, Eurocentric school of thought, who are fighting for imperialism to stay in because they are benefiting from imperialism. There are those Africans who think that they are white Africans, white Europeans living in black skins. And that is the problem that is happening in Africa right now. So the progressives have to write. The progressives have to put forward their own ideology up there. Yes, I agree with you. It has to be simplified so everyone can understand it, and it has to be appealing. But the problem, again, you have rightly pointed out, we don't read. But again, let's not forget, we have been miseducated not to laugh or understand or learn about ourselves. How many books talk about Lumumba, or how many are being distributed in the school system or curriculum, or about Sankara? They will rather teach you about Hitler. They will never tell you about what Leopold has done in the Congo. No, what they did to Lumumba or Sankara or Nkrumah. That is the point. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Coco. Generally, comrades, we have looked at one historian, and Nkrumah pointed in the previous paragraph that there is a connection between ideological standpoint and history. That relationship is perennial one. We are looking at what Ranke is doing here in his writing, and in whose grinding is he doing the axe part of it. Sister Tapua has raised a very important element on the other way of looking at this, which I also really like. But the last statement is very important, that writing history implements an ideological viewpoint which he at the same time seeks to conceal. So sometimes we expose ourselves to the writing, but are we able to look beyond the writing to understand that ideological point that is being concealed? Because most of ideological points of the writers or the authors will never be on our plain sight. Most of them. So I think it's a continuation of Nkrumah bringing us on how the historians and the history and the ideological point has been. But above all, this is chapter 3, society and ideology. So how is ideology affecting the history, and how is the history affecting the society? Because that history is what tells us about the society. And if the society history is to be written by somebody's ideological point, are we able to identify that in their writing? I think that's a very important element of what we've been studying today. And I want to thank all of you who have been able to contribute their thoughts on this. As you always say, no one's thought is perfect, but we have also understood that in the process of sharing, we learn a lot together and we build up. And I really want to appreciate some of us. At the beginning, majority of us, like even myself, the first time I interacted with this book, when I found Sister Ida and Brother Kwame reading around 3 years ago, it was very hard for me to comment. Sister Ida sometimes also could avoid. Sawinda could avoid. But today we are building up together. But it shows how hard it is. And therefore, the proposals by Brother Usu is also very important, that we must look into that direction. If we can help Nkrumah's work to reach out to the majority, which maybe at that particular moment he was not able, but it's our responsibility to see how we can now reach out to the majority on his behalf. That brings us to an end. Sister Grace, we have come to an end. And this is a quick one thing. Then Sister Ida will just bring the class for us for today. Sister Grace?
No, it's all about the reading that we write too much academic stuff that nobody seems to understand below. Anyway, we need to find out what Mr. President is reading. What is Mr. President reading? Where does he get his information? What books does he read? What does his school teach them to be able to come up with the stuff that he comes up with? Thank you.
Thank you all for having attended the class, and I hope that you will be back on Saturday to also share your views on how we can unite Africa. So as it's gone 9, let's say good night to each other till Saturday or next Thursday. Thank you.
Night,
Good night.
night. Thank you.
Night. Bye. Bye, Jen.